Yuji Itadori is one of the strongest characters in Jujutsu Kaisen, and all the fans who have read JJK Modulo know just how strong Yuji can become. But what if, in the main Jujutsu Kaisen timeline, Yuji had the power to steal the curse technique of anyone he defeated? In this video, we're going to explore what would happen if Yuji could steal people's curse techniques, and you won't believe just how strong Yuji gets! For every technique Yuji picks up, we're going to track 3 things. Number 1, how Yuji actually uses it, and what new techniques he comes up with using these new curse techniques he gets, especially in fights where he handles it differently than the person he took it from. Number 2, how strong it makes him, using Gojo as the 100% mark. If Yuji ever passes Gojo, we go over 100, so 120% means he's stronger than Gojo himself. Number 3, how each power changes the actual fight and the story around it. And I promise, you'll want to stick around until the end too, because once Yuji stacks up enough of these techniques, they combine into a brand new domain expansion that doesn't exist in canon, and we're breaking that down at the end. But first, let's set some ground rules. In this video, the first rule is that when Yuji gains a curse technique, it removes that technique from the previous sorcerer if they're still alive, and it keeps them alive. Now, I know that in the canon, it's basically lobotomy Kaisen to remove someone's curse technique, as if it's biologically engraved into a sorcerer's right prefrontal cortex, as seen during the Gojo vs. Sukuna fight. But for the sake of keeping this video simpler to understand, we're going to assume that taking someone's curse technique just turns them back into a regular human. Second, Yuji and Sukuna will be considered as one as long as Sukuna has control over Yuji's body. And finally, a draw, forfeit, or something similar will not result in Yuji gaining powers unless that person explicitly agrees to transfer said powers. And if the person or curse doesn't have its own innate curse technique, then that's of no use to us, of course. So, let's take a look at an example. But before that, a big thank you to today's sponsor, Polybuzz AI. I mean, what if I told you that with Polybuzz AI, you can chat with your favorite anime characters, and not only that, but about anything you want? For example, the other day I asked Gojo the following question. I think you and I are alike. We're both scared of women. On the other hand, unlike you, I am not tall, fit, handsome, rich with blue eyes, but Dobo, you know, same thing. Gojo's reply after that? Well, once you download Polybuzz yourself, you can ask him yourself and find out. What I love most about Polybuzz is that when you can talk with your favorite anime and fictional characters, you can have all sorts of discussions with them, like literally as if they were your actual best friends. Whether Goku, Gojo, Naruto, Luffy, Ichigo, or even your favorite waifus like Nami, Robin, Geto, Orihime, and many more, Polybuzz makes your wildest dreams a reality. And what can you talk about with them? Anything. And I mean anything. Free, enjoyable, and the best part, as an anime fan, you will never get bored of it, as the selection of anime characters they have is honestly endless. Use code DOMAIN8 to get access to 3 days premium membership completely free of charge. Use my link in the description down below to download Polybuzz AI and start chatting with your favorite anime and fictional characters today. Believe me, you will not regret it. But now, let's get back to our video. During the fight against the first Finger Bearer, where Sukuna took over and one-shot it, Yuji gains nothing since Yuji will basically gain 0 curse techniques, so we'll be skipping those. So the first actual case where Yuji does gain powers is his fight against Junpei, where he gains the Moon Dregs. Even though Junpei was transfigured by Mahito by the time Yuji kills him with a single punch, Yuji still gains Junpei's curse technique here. Moon Dreg is a low-level Shikigami that can paralyze enemies after hitting them with its poison tendrils. While the Moon Dreg is much stronger in Yuji's hands due to his immense cursed energy output, they're still not that useful for the future. Before this, I would say Yuji is around 1.5% compared to Gojo, so Moon Dregs puts Yuji up to 2%. Before we move on, it's also important to note that Yuji physically reels back when he absorbs a curse technique, as his body is not used to it at all. Next, the main fight against Mahito ends with no gains for Yuji, as Mahito manages to escape, but gaining Moon Drag still doesn't feel like a win for Yuji. This is the one person he actually tried to save, the one person he saw himself in before Mahito twisted everything into a nightmare. Yuji doesn't get a technique here so much as he gets a reminder of how badly he failed someone. He can feel Moon Drag settle into him, and it does nothing to make the moment feel like a victory. If anything, this is the first time gaining power actually hurts, and it plants the seed for exactly how much Yuji is going to hate Mahito by the time their real fight comes along. The next technique that Yuji acquires is his Death Painting brothers, Eso and Kechizu's Rot technique. The Death Painting arc's fight between Yuji, Nobara, and brothers Eso and Kechizu goes almost the same. Nobara and Yuji hit black flashes on the two brothers, and Kechizu was killed by Nobara, while Itadori kills Eso. While you might think that Yuji won't get Kechizu's technique since Nobara killed him, Eso and Kechizu share the Rot technique, so even killing one of them, especially the stronger one, is sufficient to clear the rules. Eso and Kechizu's Rot technique allows the user to use blood with poisonous and corrosive techniques, as well as allowing the user to manipulate blood. While this was a technique that Yuji was going to gain eventually, as as one of Kenjaku's sons. This speeds up the process and will prove to be important for Yuji later on. For now, Yuji's power level has jumped from 2% to 6%, since Ra technique is super situational. Yuji gains his next power-up in the beginning of the Shibuya incident from Awasaka, who has an OP ability called Inverse. If you're trying to remember who this old man is, then Awasaka is one of the guys hired by Kenjaku to guard the curtains placed in Shibuya. His curse technique is actually really cool and can become OP when activated. Awasaka's curse technique makes weak attacks stronger, while making stronger attacks weaker. In the canon story, Yuji and Megumi are able to defeat the old man with ease, as Yuji baited the final punch by making Awasaka turn on Inverse for the big punch and then switching off his cursed energy at the last moment. After the fight, Yuji decides to take the old man's curse technique since he's an evil guy anyway, and in the right hands, the technique can truly flourish. This is especially the case as the opponent will never really figure out that Yuji has the Inverse technique if Yuji only uses it as a shield to reduce the power of strong attacks while switching between another curse technique. Inverse adds another 6% to Yuji's power level, scaling him to be as strong as only 12% of Gojo Satoru in total. Now, before jumping the gun, let's see how Yuji uses Inverse in a better way in the next fight against Chozo. Chozo's curse technique is blood manipulation, one of the strongest techniques in Jujutsu Kaisen. While this fight was fairly one-sided in the original series, it's actually much more interesting now. With Itadori already knowing some levels of blood manipulation, he can hinder some of Chozo's attacks as they come in contact with him. Plus, Itadori can control his bleeding and wounds much better, boosting his overall endurance. Combined with mixing Inverse, Yuji is actually able to push Chozo far more to the edge of defeat. Still, Chozo ultimately gets the advantage as he can figure out that certain attacks deal considerably less damage at crucial moments, allowing him to switch up and deal a big blow to Itadori. This was only possible because there was no other workable curse techniques that Itadori could use against Chozo, leaving with space for Chozo to guess Itadori's curse technique to some extent. Chozo starts noticing the pattern almost by instinct. Every time his strongest hit lands soft, he adjusts, testing Itadori with smaller strikes first to see if the same drop in damage shows up again. It does. That's enough for a fighter like Chozo to work with, and he uses it to time his real opening. It's not that Itadori messes up, it's that the one technique alone was never going to be enough to hide from someone this sharp. This loss also sits differently with Yuji than the others. He's this close to blood manipulation. He can feel how it will round out everything he's already carrying, and he still can't close the gap. For the first time, Yuji understands that just having more techniques isn't the same as knowing how to use them together. That gap between power and control is going to define the next stretch of his life. Anyway, the fight ends in the same way, with Chozo thinking of Itadori as family, and the fight ending in a draw, meaning Itadori doesn't gain blood manipulation just yet. So for now, Yuji's total power level stays at 12%. Yuji's next powered-up through Sukuna's next opponent is Jogo, who has the Disaster Flames curse technique. We all know how big of a power-up this is for Itadori. Just like the canon story, Sukuna absolutely bodies Jogo. But before that, he also kills Nanako and Mimiko, the two girls Ghetto fostered. However, their abilities are honestly kinda useless. But anyway, coming back to Disaster Flames, Yuji now has access to cursed flames that are effective against special grade curses, and can also summon a meteor and open the coffin of the Iron Mountain domain. This is no joke. Jogo was able to almost kill Nanami, a grade 1 sorcerer, and Naobito Zenin, a special grade 1 sorcerer, in a single hit. With such powers, anybody who is not special grade is basically getting one-shotted, and most special grades will barely be able to keep up once Itadori truly learns how to use Disaster Flames. So Disaster Flames gave Yuji a whopping 18% power increase. This means that after defeating Jogo, Yuji has reached a total of 30%. Now Yuji is getting another major power-up with the next opponent, Mahoraga, or so you might think. However, Sukuna defeating Mahoraga doesn't mean that he will have access to the 10 Shadows technique or Mahoraga's abilities. After all, Mahoraga is technically a Shikigami, part of the 10 Shadows technique, and to gain the 10 Shadows technique, he would have to kill Megumi, which he cannot afford to do. After all, Sukuna can never fully take over Itadori, and it is impossible for Sukuna to win against Gojo without Mahoraga. Anyway, the Shibuya incident continues, and Itadori gains a new ability for real this time, Mahito's Idol Transfiguration technique. During the battle, Yuji still struggles in the beginning as he refuses to use Jogo's curse technique, but after Mahito seriously injures Nobara, just like in the canon storyline, something snaps in Yuji. He finally decides to go all out and absolutely annihilates Mahito. While he isn't as good as Jogo in using Disaster Flames, Yuji utterly destroys Mahito with the help of Todo, constantly switching places and physical and flame attacks. Due to this, Aoi Todo never loses one of his hands while defeating Mahito. And as Mahito goes down, an Idol Transfiguration becomes part of what Yuji carries from this point forward. Out of everything absorbed across the entire story, this technique might be the most dangerous of them all. Idol Transfiguration lets its user reshape any soul at will, bending the fundamental structure of a person into into whatever form the user chooses. That includes the user's own soul as well. In the wrong hands, or even in careless hands, this kind of power reshapes reality around a person's very existence. Yuji gains all of it the moment Mahito falls. But again, do not mistake this fight for a turning point built on skill. While Todo's Boogie Woogie helped, Yuji finally realizes his role in the Jujutsu world, and that he has to annihilate curses like Mahito whenever they come back to existence, making the fight much more brutal than the canon one. That awareness matters, even if the execution behind it is still messy and driven mostly by fury rather than any real discipline. Idol Transfiguration joins Disaster Flames as Yuji's top curse technique, and as Yuji begins to train himself, he's going to turn into something unrecognizable. Idol Transfiguration is the single most important addition to Yuji's arsenal. Mahito's curse technique alone would normally add another up to 20% to Yuji's power level in comparison to Gojo, pushing him far ahead of anything close to what the Jujutsu world has seen. However, Yuji cannot harness all of this potential just yet. We see glimpses of this potential, pun intended, in Yuji's fight against Yuta, who was on a mission to fake execute Itadori. This is actually the messiest fight in the series, and it's also the clearest proof that Yuji collecting curse techniques was never the same thing as Yuji mastering them. Yuji is still mentally lost. He blames himself for the death of thousands, and he doesn't know how to fix anything, let alone himself. When Yuta comes at him with real killing intent, Yuji's first instinct isn't to think, it's to throw whatever he has and hope something sticks. He opens with Disaster Flames, still clumsy with it, more comfortable making things burn than actually aiming the fire with any real precision. Yuta reads the pattern almost instantly and closes the distance before Yuji can follow up. Yuji tries switching to inverse mid-exchange, hoping to catch Yuta off guard the same way he baited Awasaka, but Yuta isn't some old man guarding a curtain. He's the strongest sorcerer after Gojo, and he doesn't need to fall for a trick twice. He overwhelms Yuji before the setup even has time to work, and then there's Idol Transfiguration, the one technique that could actually end this fight fast. Yuji has it, he knows what it does, and he can't bring himself to use it on a person, not after Junpei, not after watching Mahito turn souls into playthings. Every second Yuji hesitates is a second Yuta doesn't have to. This is the real cost of what happened with Junpei. It doesn't just haunt Yuji emotionally, it actively costs him fights, because the one tool that could save him is the one tool he refuses to touch. So Yuji loses, badly, and not because he lacks power. He loses because power without control or clarity is just noise in a real fight. But there's a lot more to look forward to, as Yuta and Megumi are here to get Itadori back on his feet. And this fight is exactly what convinces Yuji that something in how he approaches all of this has to change. After the Shibuya incident, and before the start of the coming games, there's a stretch of time where nothing gets fought. Yuji, recovering physically and mentally from everything that happened in Shibuya, starts finally doing something he's never really done before. He sits down and deliberately catalogs every piece of power sitting inside of his body, one technique at a time. He stops just reacting to whatever comes up mid-fight. Yuji starts sparring seriously for the first time, testing combinations between techniques that used to feel completely disconnected from each other. Chozo is the first one to actually sit down with him. They spend hours going over blood manipulation basics, Chozo correcting the way Yuji tries to force blood to move instead of guiding it. It's slow going at first, since Yuji is used to solving problems with brute strength, and blood manipulation punishes exactly that instinct. But Chozo was patient, and being Kamo's descendant means the technique was always going to click into place eventually. It just needed real instruction instead of trial by combat. Todo becomes his next sparring partner, and their sessions turn into something closer to controlled chaos. Todo pushes him to actually use Idol Transfiguration in live combat instead of avoiding it, forcing Yuji to practice small, careful adjustments instead of treating the technique like a weapon that only works at full power. One session ends with Yuji accidentally warping his own arm structure and needing a minute to fix it back. More embarrassing than dangerous, but it's the kind of mistake he needs to make somewhere that isn't a real fight. Not every session goes well. There's a stretch where Yuji can't hold more than two techniques active at once without losing control of at least one of them, and it gets to him. He snaps at Todo more than once, frustrated that raw power isn't turning into actual skill fast enough. Todo doesn't let him wallow in it, reminding him that Gojo didn't get this strong overnight either, and that mastery is supposed to feel slow. Through such strenuous training, Yuji finally understands the basics of his techniques and comes up with tactics. For example, he can use Junpei's Shikigami to fight off against most human opponents, poisoning them until they accept defeat, before saving them to avoid unnecessary deaths, mixing an inverse and faking damage to never let the enemy understand that Yuji even has a technique like this. Plus, Yuji has to spend a lot of time learning how to master three main techniques: blood manipulation, disaster flames, and idol transfiguration. As Kamo's descendant, it was inevitable for Itadori to learn blood manipulation. By gaining the Rot technique and Chozo's guidance, Itadori can master blood manipulation. Then, he has to spend time learning how to control disaster flames, enough to be able to summon the meteor. Although Itadori cannot actually practice practice creating the meteor, mastering the technique would allow Itadori to use it against a strong opponent, or even Sukuna. While Sukuna can easily destroy the meteor, Itadori can use it as a distraction. And most importantly, Itadori needs to master idle transfiguration. This is the key to becoming the strongest sorcerer of all time, as mastery of this ability and its domain, self-embodiment to perfection, would reinforce his already durable body by using soul multiplicity and forming the polymorphic soul isomer. This would also allow Itadori to achieve the instant spirit body of distorted killing form later on. With the training complete, Yuji has unlocked the full potential of his curse technique so far, pushing him to 50% of power when compared to Gojo Satoru. Yuji's next fights are against Hanyu and Haba, whose techniques allow them to basically turn their hair into a jet plane and jet helicopter respectively. Yuji picks up airplane hair and helicopter hair once the two of them go down. It was already an easy battle in the canon, and now it's literally child's play for Itadori. These techniques let their user hover and fly using nothing but their own hair. It's a strange power, more amusing than impressive next to fire manipulation or idle transfiguration. But what matters here is how casually Yuji absorbs it into himself. He barely notices a new technique settling into place, distracted more by how ridiculous it looks than by any real sense of gaining something new. This is Yuji operating almost entirely on instinct now, picking up power the way someone picks up a new habit without thinking twice about it. The mismatch in stakes says everything about how far he's come since Junpei. Everything in this video has been building towards one fight, Yuji alongside Gojo against Sukuna. Same premise, Sukuna using Megami's body, and it's December 24th. Ichiji pulls up a curtain and Utahime uses her solo forbidden area technique and advances it into a ritual with different gestures, including music, empowered words, hand signs, and dancing. This ritual amplifies Gojo's cursed energy, and he further increases the output with hand signs and incantations of his own. Gojo launches a 200% hollow purple and takes the lead just like in the manga. However, everything changes when Sukuna reveals Mahoraga. Instead of waiting for Gojo to be defeated, Yuji rushes into battle. In the manga, the fight starts to derail from here, but this, it's more balanced. Instead of a 2-on-1, it becomes a 2-on-2, and Yuji was ready for the fight. Since the beginning of the Culling Games, he's mastered reversed curse technique and is at his peak form, with an output of 90% power when compared to the greatest sorcerer of all time, Gojo Satoru. Now, Yuji can go toe-to-toe against Sukuna by mixing all of his attacks. Yuji uses Disaster Flames to attack Sukuna, mixes things with Inverse, which causes problems for Sukuna, even though he's aware that Yuji can use it, as Sukuna has no way of knowing when Itadori will use it in hand-to-hand combat. Sukuna isn't used to this. He's fought this body before, back when it was just a scared kid throwing punches with no plan behind him. But this is different. Every exchange, Itadori is one step ahead of where Sukuna expects him to be, mixing techniques in ways that don't give Sukuna a clean read on what's coming next. For the first time since taking over Megami's body, Sukuna has to actually think mid-fight, instead of just reacting on instinct, and that gap costs him. Itadori also uses piercing blood constantly, followed by trying to use idle transfiguration on Sukuna constantly to try and safely separate Sukuna and Megami's souls safely. While Sukuna could potentially have Mahoraga adapt to all of Yuji's curse techniques in a few seconds and kill him, that would be enough time for Gojo to use Infinity and exercise Mahoraga. And in a pure one-on-one, Mahoraga will lose without support. So, Sukuna also summons the merged beast Agito, just like in the manga, to turn it into a 2-on-3. But at this moment, Sukuna has to let Mahoraga and Agito focus on Gojo to ensure that he can get Mahoraga to adapt to Infinity so he can use the World Slash, just like in the manga. Here, things will actually move much faster than the manga's pace. Since Yuji is holding Sukuna back and preventing him from fighting alongside Mahoraga and Agito, the fight has become much more manageable for Gojo. While fighting the two, Gojo catches hold of Agito and launches a maximum output curse technique Lapse Blue onto Agito, completely overwhelming the cursed spirit's regenerative ability. Now, Gojo has a 1v1 against Mahoraga, and Sukuna is desperate to get Yuji away from him. However, Yuji has grown tremendously during this battle, just like in the manga. And this Yuji with all the curse techniques is already far stronger. Yuji has been using the perfected physical form, using Mahito's self-embodiment of perfection techniques instant spirit body of distorted killing form. Plus, Yuji's powers as a vessel have started to activate, and he can use the shrine technique after landing a black flash. And Yuji continues to hit black flashes back to back, since Sukuna's attacks can't damage him as much anymore. Sukuna even loses consciousness for a second, and by the time he comes back to reality, Mahoraga is dead. Gojo managed to one-shot Mahoraga with an unlimited hollow purple. While Mahoraga is dead, Gojo is still injured, as this was an unlimited hollow purple to ensure that Mahoraga doesn't manage to survive. Still, Gojo uses every last bit of his strength to try and force his domain expansion. As Sukuna Sukuna gets distracted, Yuji manages to land a final Black Flash with Idol Transfiguration, leading into Yuji's domain expansion, where Itadori safely separates Megumi and Sukuna's soul with a non-contact dismantle, leaving Sukuna as a blob who is finally exorcised. With this, Yuji gains all of Sukuna's curse techniques in full: dismantle and cleave, along with his domain expansion, Malevolent Shrine. But Yuji stacking up this many techniques was never just about numbers. By the end of the fight, Yuji isn't only holding Disaster Flames, Idol Transfiguration, Blood Manipulation, Inverse, and Sukuna's own Dismantle and Cleave. He's holding enough pieces of enough people that his own cursed energy starts working like a domain of its own. This is where Yuji unlocks a domain expansion that doesn't exist in canon: Chimera's Cradle. The barrier works like Sukuna's Malevolent Shrine, so anything inside it is a guaranteed hit. But instead of just cutting or crushing, the hit applies Idol Transfiguration on contact, quietly rewriting whatever it touches back down to something harmless. The same rule we set at the start of the video, where taking a technique doesn't kill the person, it just turns them back to normal. On the power scale, this is the moment Yuji goes past Gojo, sitting around 140%. He's not just the strongest sorcerer in Jujutsu Kaisen at this point, he's basically become the new ceiling of Jujutsu, the way Gojo did before him. Thanks for watching this video! Make sure you like and subscribe, and click on this video next for more great anime content! Go on, check it out!